They say every city has corners you learn to avoid if you live there long enough. When I moved back to Tucson in early 2019, I thought I knew them all. I'd grown up in that dry heat, with desert dust in my shoes and saguaros taller than houses reminding me I was home. But the years I'd spent away dulled that instinct. Tucson was familiar, yet strangely foreign, and I walked back into it like a man who thought he was wiser than he really was. I was 27, fresh off a breakup that cracked me deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd been living in Denver for 3 years, trying to build a life with a woman I thought was the one. Turned out she wasn't, and I came crawling back to Tucson with my pride in shambles. My parents welcomed me with open arms, but nights in my apartment stretched long and quiet. I tried to fill them with gym sessions, runs down Speedway Boulevard, and protein shakes. Sweat kept my mind from drifting back to her, but when the workouts ended and the silence set in, I felt the weight. That's what led me to Circle K that Sunday night, March 23rd, 2019. I'd just finished 2 hours of pushing iron at the local gym, the kind of session where your muscles shake walking out the door. My plan was simple: swing by, grab a protein bar, hit the ATM, then head home. I wasn't thinking about anything more than refueling and maybe zoning out with a movie afterward. The Circle K sat on East Speedway, one of those busy stretches where college kids, construction workers, and night owls collide. I'd been in that store 100 times in high school, back when my buddies and I thought buying energy drinks at midnight made us rebels. That night, it was lit up like always, buzzing fluorescent lights casting a pale glow over aisles stacked with chips, candy, and the smell of stale coffee. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the coffee station, pacing in short, jerky steps, muttering words I couldn't catch. Her hoodie was pulled low despite the warmth, her eyeliner smudged down her cheeks like she'd been crying, and her lips were cracked like she hadn't had water in days. She looked rough, no denying it, but Tucson was no stranger to people caught in bad cycles. I've seen meth heads on Speedway, guys talking to themselves on 4th Avenue, women asking for a few bucks outside bars. She barely registered. I just wanted my snack and to get moving. I paid the cashier, a kid younger than me, yawning like he'd been on shift too long, then walked out with my bar and a bottle of water. The desert night felt good on my skin, cooler now that the sun was down. I leaned against my car, cracked the bottle, and tried not to think about how empty my apartment would feel when I got back. That's when I heard the voice. "Hey, can you give me a ride?" I looked up. It was her. She'd followed me out. Her voice was raspy, trembling like she'd been crying for hours. Up close, her eyes were wide, almost too wide, locked on me without blinking. "My boyfriend kicked me out," she said, her words tumbling fast. "Ride, just a few blocks. I don't feel safe. Please, for a second." Guilt tugged at me. I was raised to help people. My mom drilled it into me that you don't turn your back when someone's in need. But something about her stare hit me in the gut. It wasn't desperation, not really. It was calculation, sharp and unblinking. I forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry, I'm headed the other way." She stepped closer. "Please, it won't take long." Her hand brushed my car door handle. I locked it with a sharp click. Her eyes flicked down at the sound, and when she looked back up, there was no plea in them anymore. There was something else. And that's when I saw the SUV. It sat at the far corner of the lot, engine idling, lights dimmed just enough to blend with the shadows. At first glance, it looked like any other late-night car waiting for someone to finish buying beer or cigarettes. But when you've lived in a city long enough, you notice the difference between normal and wrong, and that SUV was wrong. The figure behind the wheel wasn't scrolling a phone or tapping the steering wheel. He was watching me. The woman leaned in closer, her breath sour and heavy. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." My chest tightened. The words were soft, but the weight behind them pressed hard. This wasn't a cry for help. This was bait. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but years of keeping the peace in awkward situations made me hesitate. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was really in trouble. Maybe the SUV wasn't connected. But the way her eyes flicked toward that corner just once, quick and nervous, told me everything. I gripped the bottle of water so tight it crinkled in my hand. Voice firmer this time. "Look, I can't help you," I said. She leaned on the car, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You don't want this." Adrenaline surged through me. My hand shot to the door handle. I yanked it open, slid inside, and slammed the locks down. She grabbed at the handle, but I was already twisting the key. The engine roared, and I hit reverse so fast my tires squealed against the asphalt. Her face was inches from the glass, her eyes wild. For a heartbeat, it felt like she was going to smash her fist through the window. Then I was gone, shooting backward out of the space, throwing the car into drive, and flooring it towards Speedway. In the rear view, the SUV's headlights flared on. My pulse hammered as I cut hard into traffic. The SUV rolled forward but didn't follow. Maybe they'd lost their window, maybe they didn't want to risk chasing me. Either way, I wasn't slowing down to find out. I drove half a mile before I realized my hands were shaking so bad the wheel rattled. I pulled into another parking lot, breath ragged, and fumbled for my phone. My thumb hit 911 before I even thought about it. "911, what's your emergency?" The words poured out of me in a rush. "I was just at the Circle K on Speedway. There's a woman there, she was asking for a ride, but there's an SUV waiting. Something's not right, it's a setup, I swear." The dispatcher's voice was calm, practiced. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" "No, I got away, but they're still there. Please, someone's going to get hurt." There was a pause, then a shift in her tone. "We've had reports of similar incidents near Tucson gas stations. Stranded women approaching men, asking for rides, leading them to accomplices. You did the right thing by leaving. Officers are on the way to check it out." The confirmation hit me like a weight in the chest. I wasn't crazy. This was real. I sat there for a long minute, staring at my own pale reflection in the windshield. I thought of what could have happened if I'd said yes, if I'd unlocked the door and let her in. That SUV wouldn't have just been watching, it would have been moving. I drove home in silence that night, the city lights blurring past. But that Circle K, once just another late-night stop, would never feel the same again. When I finally made it home that night, my apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had crept closer while I was gone. I dropped my keys on the counter and just stood in the dark, listening to my own breath. My muscles were still buzzing from the workout, but the adrenaline from the Circle K had left me wired in a way no amount of lifting ever had. I replayed it over and over. Her eyes, the way she tugged at my car door like she had every right to get in, the SUV waiting in the shadows. I kept asking myself what would have happened if I hadn't trusted that instinct, if I'd given in to the guilt that told me I should help her. I pictured myself sitting in that driver's seat with her beside me, the SUV pulling in close, the doors flying open. I imagined fists, knives, maybe worse. I didn't sleep that night. My phone sat by the bed, buzzing every so often with phantom vibrations. I half expected the woman or the men in the SUV to track me down somehow. I told myself they didn't know who I was or where I lived, but fear doesn't listen to logic. The next morning, I stopped by my parents' house for breakfast. Mom noticed immediately. "Look pale," she said, sliding scrambled eggs onto my plate. "Did you sleep at all?" Not much," I admitted. I hesitated, then told them everything. Dad set his coffee mug down hard enough that it rattled. "I've ever heard one. You did the right thing leaving." "Damn," he muttered. "That's a setup if Mom's face tightened. How hungry you are." "Daniel, you can't stop at those places late at night anymore, I don't care." Her words stung, partly because she was right. I'd always prided myself on being independent, able to take care of myself. But that night had shown me how quickly things could turn. Later that week, I got a call from a Tucson police officer. He wanted a formal statement. I met him at the station where he explained they'd been tracking a series of similar scams. "They look for guys alone," he told me, jotting notes. "Usually someone leaving a gym, a bar, or working late. The woman plays the victim, pulls at heartstrings. The accomplices wait nearby. Best case scenario, you get robbed. Worst case? He trailed off, shaking his head. Do they ever catch these people? I asked. Sometimes, but they move around. Gas stations, parking lots, rest stops. They count on people being too embarrassed to report it. I signed the paperwork, my hand steady but my stomach turning. Walking out of the station into the Arizona sun, I realized something had shifted. Tucson wasn't the same city I'd grown up in. Or maybe it was. And I was just finally seeing it clearly. That night, I drove past the Circle K. The lot looked normal, people fueling up, kids grabbing sodas. But in my eyes, it had changed forever. Life went on, but not in the same way. I avoided gas stations after dark. If my tank was low, I filled it during the day, even if it meant rearranging my schedule. The gym wasn't the same either. Every time I left at night, I scanned the parking lot like a soldier on watch. My friends noticed the change. One evening, after a workout, my buddy Chris slapped me on the shoulder. Always tense? You used to chill with us after lifts? Man, I gave him the short version of the Circle K story. His grin faded. Dude, that's messed up. Yeah, I said. Feels like I barely got out. He nodded slowly. Guess instincts count for something, huh? Instincts. That word stuck with me. For years, I'd thought instincts were just another word for paranoia, something you pushed aside to keep from overreacting. But maybe instincts were the body's way of saving your life before your brain caught up. Weeks passed. I started jogging in the evenings instead of late-night drives. The city was still Tucson. Sunsets over the Catalina Mountains, the smell of mesquite in the air. But my lens had changed. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every stranger a question mark. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I stopped by a different gas station. The sun was still high, people milling around. As I paid inside, I noticed a young guy ahead of me, maybe college age, chatting with a woman who looked eerily familiar to the one I'd seen at Circle K. Same hoodie pulled low, same restless energy. She leaned in close, her voice low but urgent. My stomach dropped. The kid looked uncertain, glancing toward the lot. I followed his gaze. Sure enough, a dark SUV sat idling by the edge of the property. It was happening again. Without thinking, I stepped closer. "Hey," I said to the kid, casual but firm. "You ready? We're late." He blinked at me, confused. The woman shot me a glare sharp enough to cut. "Come on," I urged, giving him the look that says don't argue. The kid stammered something about catching up later and followed me out. We walked to my car in silence until we were clear of the lot. "Thanks," he finally said. I didn't know what to do. She said she needed a ride. "Don't," I said, "guy, they trap. If something feels off, trust it, they set people up." "You don't want to be the next." His face paled as he glanced back at the SUV. Jesus. I drove off, my pulse steady but my mind racing. It wasn't just me. This was bigger, ongoing, a shadow moving through Tucson's nights. Months passed and life slowly steadied. I still carried the memory of that night, but it no longer shook me the same way. Instead, it sharpened me. I paid attention. I trusted the signals I used to brush aside. One evening in December, I ran into the same officer who'd taken my statement at a local coffee shop. He recognized me instantly. "Brooks, right? Circle K." "Yeah," I said. "Any news?" He nodded. "Build the case. We picked up a crew in October. Same pattern, same setups. Your report helped. I felt something loosen in my chest." "So they're off the streets?" "For now. Doesn't mean others won't try, but you did the right thing." Walking back to my car that night, I realized how close I'd come to being another statistic, another story whispered about in gyms and parking lots. But I wasn't, because for once I'd trusted myself enough to walk, or rather drive, away. The Circle K on Speedway still sits there, glowing under the desert night. Sometimes I drive past, windows down, warm air brushing my face. I don't stop. Not anymore. That place taught me something no workout ever could. Survival isn't about strength alone. It's about listening when your gut tells you something's wrong. And that lesson sticks with me every single day. Life doesn't always present its dangers in obvious ways. Sometimes it comes disguised as a plea for help, a friendly smile, or a situation that tugs at your sense of decency. But instincts exist for a reason. When something feels off, it usually is. Trusting yourself, even if it feels impolite, even if it feels cold, can be the difference between walking away safe or never walking away at all. I've always believed that road trips could clear the mind. When I was younger, I used to drive just for the sake of being alone with my thoughts, watching the desert pass by and letting the horizon pull me forward. But that November weekend in 2014, the road didn't feel freeing. It felt like a trap. I was 29, and life had me by the throat. Just 2 weeks earlier, I lost my job at a car dealership in Albuquerque. Sales had been slipping for months, the manager breathing down our necks about numbers. When he called me into his office, I knew what was coming. I left with a cardboard box of my things and a knot in my stomach. No severance, no prospects, and only a few $100 in savings. So when my younger sister called me, voice glowing with happiness, telling me she was finally engaged and wanted me home for the party in California, I knew I had to be there no matter what. I couldn't afford a flight, and the bus schedules didn't line up. Driving was my only option. I left New Mexico before sunrise on Friday, shoving my bag into the back seat of my old Ford Taurus. The trip wasn't supposed to be complicated. 2 long days of driving, crash at a motel, and roll into California in time for the party. But travel has a way of chewing you up when you're already on edge. That first night, I stopped at a cheap motel on the outskirts of Gallup, the kind with flickering neon signs and carpets that smelled like cigarettes no matter how many times they vacuumed them. As I pulled into the lot, I noticed a group of men outside leaning against the railing, smoking and talking too loudly. They looked half drunk, their voices echoing across the lot. I kept my head down, checked in, and carried my bag quickly to my room. But sleep never really came. The men stayed outside until 3 in the morning, laughing, yelling, arguing over some nonsense. Every time I thought it was quiet enough to drift off, one of them would shout and jolt me awake. At one point, I peeked out the blinds. One of the guys, a tall man with a shaved head, was staring straight at my car, arms crossed, cigarette glowing between his fingers. He didn't look away when I ducked back behind the curtain. The next morning, running on fumes, I stopped at a small diner off the highway. The waitress was kind, middle-aged with tired eyes. As she poured my coffee, she leaned closer and said, "Don't leave valuables in your car, honey. Folks been breaking into travelers' vehicles around here." It wasn't exactly comforting. By the time I hit Arizona that evening, I felt like the road itself was turning against me. My body ached, my eyes burned, and every little thing seemed louder, sharper. That's when I pulled into the Circle K in El Mirage, just as the sun dipped and the sky went from orange to dark purple. I told myself it was just a quick stop for gas and coffee. But that Circle K would mark the beginning of a night I'll never forget. I parked directly under the brightest lights in the lot, a trick I'd learned from my dad. "If you've got to stop, stop where everyone can see you," he always said. I kept repeating those words in my head as I stepped out of the Taurus and slid the nozzle into the tank. That's when I noticed it. A rust-colored Corolla rolled in, the kind of car that had been pieced together from junkyard parts. The doors were mismatched shades of primer, and the paint was dull. Inside sat 2 people, but they didn't move to get out. They just sat there. At first, I brushed it off. People sit in their cars all the time, maybe checking their phones, maybe arguing. But I could feel it. Their eyes were on me. I focused on the pump, watching the numbers climb. "Don't be paranoid," I told myself. "You're exhausted." I went inside to grab a coffee. The store was its usual mix of humming coolers, fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of burnt hot dogs rolling endlessly on their metal bars. I paid, nodded at the cashier, and stepped back into the night air. The Corolla had moved. It wasn't at the far end of the lot anymore. It was closer, just a few spaces away from my car. The driver's face was hard to see in the dim light, but the passenger was slouched low, hat pulled down, shoulders rigid. A voice in my head whispered, "Get in the car." I didn't waste time. I climbed in, locked the doors, and pulled away. The Taurus rattled as I hit the road, and for a few miles, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just two strangers in a junker Corolla. But 20 minutes later, I glanced in the mirror. There it was. Same rust-colored Corolla, 2 cars back, slipping through traffic like a shadow. I switched lanes. They switched lanes. I slowed down. They slowed down. My grip tightened on the wheel. My stomach dropped. This wasn't nothing. I tried every trick I could think of. I merged onto side roads, looped back onto the highway, even pulled behind a semi for cover. Each time, when I checked the mirror, the Corolla was still there. Panic simmered beneath my ribs. My mind kept circling back to the motel the night before. The man staring at my car, arms crossed. Was it him? Had they followed me from Gallup all the way here? I needed to know. 40 miles down the road, I spotted another Circle K near the highway. My heart thudded as I signaled and pulled in. If they followed me again, then it was no coincidence. I parked crooked, right near the entrance, and cut the engine. A minute later, the Corolla came in fast, headlights flashing. The passenger door swung open. And that's when I saw him, the man from the motel. Shaved head, cigarette still between his fingers, eyes locked on me like he'd been waiting for this moment. He stepped out slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in a hurry at all. He didn't need to be. He already had me cornered. Every nerve in my body screamed. My breath caught. My hand shook on the wheel. The man started walking toward my car. I didn't think. I reacted. My hand slammed the shifter into reverse. Tires squealed as I shot backward, nearly clipping the corner of a lifted truck. The driver of that truck honked and shouted, but I barely heard it. My eyes were on the man in the lot, his slow steps quickening as I sped away. I cranked the wheel, threw it into drive, and tore out of the Circle K, my coffee spilling across the floorboard. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it over the engine. The Corolla lunged forward in my rear view, headlights bouncing. For a mile, they kept pace, the gap closing and stretching like a rubber band. I floored it, weaving through traffic, eyes darting from the road to the mirror and back again. Then, just as suddenly, they were gone. I don't know when they peeled off, if they turned down a side road or just decided I wasn't worth it. But after another 10 miles, the mirror showed nothing but dark desert highway. Still, I couldn't stop. I drove another hour without a break, jaw clenched, every pair of headlights in the distance setting my nerves on fire. Finally, I spotted a crowded rest stop lit up like a football field. Families walking dogs, kids playing tag near the vending machines. It felt safer. I pulled in, parked between 2 RVs, and shut off the engine. For a long time, I just sat there, hands gripping the wheel, staring at nothing. My body trembled with the aftershock of fear. Eventually, I called my sister. My voice cracked as I told her, "I don't know what's happening. Someone's been following me since yesterday. I don't think it's random." There was silence on the other end, then her soft voice. "Ryan, just get home. Please. Just get here safe." I made it to California the next day, hours later than I planned. The party had already started, my sister glowing as she showed off the ring. I tried to smile, to act normal, but inside I felt hollow. No one else on the road knew what I'd just gone through. To them, it was just another weekend. To me, it was proof that danger doesn't always wear a mask or wave a weapon. Sometimes it just sits in a rust-colored Corolla and waits for you to ignore the voice in your gut. For months after, I couldn't shake it. Every time I got behind the wheel, I checked my mirrors too often. Every gas station felt hostile, every parking lot suspicious. I told a few friends, but most just shrugged it off. Paranoid, One said, maybe. But paranoia kept me alive that night. Years later, when I drive past a Circle K on a late-night trip, I feel it again, the cold edge of that evening. The way the man walked toward me like I was already his. The way fear turned into survival in a split second. I'll never know what they wanted. Money, my car, maybe worse. But I know this. I trusted my instincts, and that made all the difference. Sometimes we downplay our own instincts, brushing them off as paranoia or nerves. But those gut feelings are survival's oldest tool. When the world tilts and something feels wrong, trust yourself. It's better to seem rude or overly cautious than to ignore the signs and pay a price you can't come back from. I was 19 the year everything happened, stuck in that uncertain stretch between being a kid and trying to figure out how to be an adult. Most people I knew were either in college or already working trades, but I was still dragging myself through night shifts at a Circle K on East Thomas Road in Phoenix. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was a paycheck, and for me, that meant survival. Life at home had been falling apart for a while. My mom had been in and out of hospitals with breathing problems, the kind of illness that doesn't kill you all at once but grinds you down day by day. My dad had walked out years earlier, and we never heard from him again. So it was just me, my mom, and a stack of bills that never seemed to shrink no matter how much overtime I worked. Community college was supposed to be my way forward, but I couldn't afford tuition until I saved up. The graveyard shift was the best I could do. No one else wanted it, and the extra pay made it hard to turn down. The Circle K at night was usually dead quiet. A few truckers came through, sometimes homeless people looking for warmth, but for the most part, it was just fluorescent lights humming above my head and the sound of refrigerators kicking on and off. My coworker Frank had been there longer than me. He was pushing 50, with thinning hair and a gut that strained against his red polo shirt. He liked to act like he ran the place even though technically he didn't. He had this way of looking at you too long, his eyes sliding over like he was sizing you up, and his humor always carried a bite to it. I didn't like him, but I tolerated him. I needed the job. That Monday night in February, I came in around 11:40, punched in, and started stocking the shelves with chips and sodas. Frank was leaning against the counter, picking at his teeth with a pen cap. He gave me a nod and said, "Don't use the restroom tonight. Plumbing's messed up. If you need to go, cross the street." I remember just shrugging. The Circle K was old, and half the time something was broken. I didn't think twice about it, not then. But an hour later, as I was crouched by the chip rack, I heard it. A faint thud, muffled and rhythmic, coming from the back where the restroom was. I froze, holding a bag of Doritos in my hand, listening. There it was again. Thud. Thud. Like someone was knocking inside the wall. "Hey!" I called out to Frank. "You hear that?" He looked up slowly, smirk tugging at his lips. "Pipes," he said. "Old building. You'll get used to it." I wanted to believe him, but something about his grin made me uneasy. The sounds didn't stop. Every few minutes, another thud rattled faintly against the wall. Sometimes it was quick, like a fist hitting hard. Other times it was slower, dragging. I kept telling myself it was plumbing, just like Frank said, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. By 2 a.m, the store was empty. No customers, no cars in the lot, just me stacking candy near the counter. The noises had grown louder. And once, I swear on my life, I heard something that wasn't just thumping. It sounded like a muffled voice, a cry. My chest tightened. I glanced at Frank, who was sitting behind the counter flipping through a sports magazine like he didn't have a care in the world. I walked up and said, "Can I get the restroom key? I need to check something." The change in his face was immediate. His easy grin vanished, and his jaw tightened. "It's broken," he said flatly. "I told you. It doesn't sound like plumbing," I pressed. "Something's wrong back there." His eyes went cold, threatening. "Don't," he snapped. His tone wasn't joking anymore. It was sharp. Almost for a second I just stood there, caught off guard by the edge in his voice. Then I tried again, softer this time. "Frank, seriously, just give me the key. What's the big deal?" That's when he moved. He lunged across the counter, his hand shooting toward the ring of keys. I stumbled back in shock, bumping into the candy display. Bags of Skittles and Reese's tumbled to the floor, scattering across the tile. Frank's face was twisted, his teeth gritted, eyes blazing with something I'd never seen before. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He just grabbed at the keys like a man possessed. Instinct kicked in. I shoved him back as hard as I could, the counter between us shaking under the force. Frank staggered, then cursed under his breath, his hands curling into fists. "Don't," he growled. "I told you not to." My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I bent down, grabbed a handful of candy from the floor, and threw it at him just to create space. Skittles bounced off his chest, and for a moment it broke his momentum. That was all I needed. I turned and bolted for the front door. My legs felt like they barely touched the ground, my shoes sliding on the tile as I pushed through the glass door and burst into the night air. "Help!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Somebody help!" By sheer luck, headlights swung into the lot. A car pulled up to the pump and a man stepped out, confused by the scene unfolding. Frank had stopped at the doorway, his face caught in the harsh glare of the parking lot lights. For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker across his features. He didn't chase me. The customer shouted, "What's going on here?" I couldn't even explain. My words tumbled over each other, broken by gasps. "The bathroom. Please, call the cops." Something in the man's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. I stood there trembling, every muscle in my body screaming with adrenaline, while Frank slunk back into the store like a shadow retreating. The police came fast. Blue and red lights splashed across the parking lot, painting the white walls of the Circle K in shifting colors. 2 officers stormed inside while another kept me outside, trying to calm me down enough to give a statement. Through the glass, I saw Frank cornered, his hands raised as they barked orders. He didn't resist, just scowled like the world had betrayed him. They cuffed him and dragged him out, his head low, eyes avoiding mine. Then another officer used the keys to open the restroom door. What came next froze me in place. Inside was a girl, young, maybe 15 or 16. Her clothes were dirty, her face streaked with tears, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She blinked against the sudden light, hands shaking as she lifted them to shield her eyes. "She's alive," one of the officers said, his voice firm but gentle. They wrapped her in a blanket, guiding her out carefully. I just stood there stunned. My legs wouldn't move, my mind wouldn't process what I was seeing. The thuds, the muffled cries. It hadn't been plumbing. It had been her fighting to be heard. I nearly ignored it. They closed the store for investigation. I never worked another shift there. In fact, I never stepped inside that Circle K again. In the weeks that followed, I kept replaying everything in my mind. Frank's smirk when I asked about the noises, the way his face changed when I pressed him, the way he lunged, desperate, like his whole plan was crumbling in front of him. What haunted me most wasn't the danger I had been in. It was the thought of how close I came to dismissing it. If I had brushed off the sounds as plumbing like he said, that girl might still be locked in that restroom. Or worse. I didn't sleep much for a long time after that. Every little creak in the house, every bump in the night, sent me spiraling back to that shift. But slowly I realized something important. I hadn't just been afraid. I had listened to my gut. And because of that, someone was alive. Sometimes when I think back, I wonder about that girl. Where she ended up, if she's okay now, I'll probably never know. But I hope she found her way back to something like normal, the same way I eventually did. I was just a 19-year-old kid stocking shelves in a convenience store. But that night taught me more about responsibility and courage than any classroom ever could. Evil doesn't always look like a villain in a mask. Sometimes it looks like the coworker you laugh with, the person who tells crude jokes but seems harmless enough. The lesson I carry is this: never ignore your instincts and never dismiss the small signs when something feels wrong. A cry for help isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a faint thud behind a locked door, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. By the time I was 22, I was already living two different lives. By day, I was a college kid with a camera slung over my shoulder, trying to make sense of shutter speeds, aperture, and composition. Photography was my passion, the only thing that made me feel like I was building towards something real. By night, though, I was just another tired face behind the counter at Circle K, pouring burnt coffee for strangers and cleaning up after people who never said thank you. My parents lived halfway across the country in Kansas, and sometimes the distance felt like a weight strapped to my chest. They supported me as best they could, but tuition wasn't cheap, and loans only stretched so far. So I worked nights, graveyard shifts in a convenience store tucked between an empty lot and a ragged line of trees on North Oracle Road in Tucson. The store had a tired look about it, like it had been standing long enough to see too much. People used to ask me if I got bored working overnight. The truth was, boredom wasn't the problem. Loneliness was. After midnight, the city seemed to shrink into a hollowed-out version of itself. Streets went quiet, lights felt dimmer, and every sound carried too far. I'd sweep floors or mop the corners, the hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. Sometimes I'd prop my textbooks open behind the counter, highlighting chapters until my eyes stung. That night, Thursday, October 12th, 2017, felt no different at first. I clocked in just after midnight, tugged the red Circle K polo over my shoulders, and nodded at Laura. She was 26, a part-time nursing student, and she worked nights for the same reason I did: money we couldn't get anywhere else. She had this grounded way about her, though. Where I was jittery and restless, she was steady, sometimes even cold. She was in the back office working on paperwork while I cleaned the front windows. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like branches dragging against the glass. I paused, rag in hand, and looked up. That's when I saw it. Across the parking lot near the tree line, a figure stood under the dim streetlight, tall, still, almost like a shadow carved into the night. I froze, the rag slipping from my fingers. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe a late-night wanderer, maybe just my own reflection. But no matter how I rationalized it, I knew what I saw. Someone was out there, watching. I blinked, and just like that, it was gone. The parking lot stretched empty under the buzzing light. My stomach twisted. I shoved the rag into the bucket and walked quickly to the back office. "Laura," I said, my voice uneven, "did you see someone outside? By the trees?" She didn't even glance up from her paperwork. "Things. Probably your reflection in the glass." "Marcus, it's 1 a.m. You're seeing..." "It wasn't my reflection," I insisted. She sighed. "Don't spook yourself. Trust me, if you work this shift long enough, you'll start hearing and seeing all kinds of things that aren't there." I wanted to believe her, but the unease clung to me like static. For the rest of that hour, every squeak of the mop, every rustle from outside, made my skin crawl. And that was only the beginning. By the time 1:30 rolled around, I was trying hard to shake it off. I'd gone back to mopping, moving in slow circles, the bucket sloshing beside me. Laura had finished her paperwork and come up front, leaning on the counter with that half-bored expression she always wore. That's when it happened again. A sound, not scratching this time, but a heavy, deliberate thump. It echoed from above, from the roof. My head jerked up, eyes scanning the ceiling as if I could see through it. "You hear that?" I asked. Laura raised her brows. "Hear what?" "Something on the roof," I said, my chest tightening. Like someone landed up there." She smirked. "What, you think Spider-Man's stalking Circle K now?" I didn't laugh. My throat felt dry. Against all logic, I stepped outside. The night air was sharp, carrying the smell of asphalt cooling under the streetlights. I craned my neck, staring up at the roofline, but all I could see was darkness. The rooftop stretched like a black void, silent and unreadable. A part of me wanted to climb up there, prove myself wrong. But my feet wouldn't move any closer. It wasn't just fear. It was instinct. Some buried voice in my head telling me that if I went up there, I wouldn't come back down the same. Laura finally came outside, arms crossed. "Marcus, seriously, if you're gonna panic over shadows and sounds, you won't last long here. It's a gas station, not a horror movie." Her words tried to ground me, but even she couldn't hide the unease creeping into her tone. I caught her glancing up at the roof just for a second too long, before she forced a laugh. We both laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. But the fear stayed. It sat between us like an unwelcome guest neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The rest of the shift dragged, the silence inside heavier than usual. We avoided talking about it, both pretending nothing had happened. But when 3 o'clock finally came, I could feel Laura's relief as much as my own. We walked out together, the parking lot stretching wide and empty under the lights. I fished my keys out of my pocket, climbed into my beat-up Honda, and started the engine. Laura unlocked her sedan a few spaces over, giving me a wave. Then it happened. A loud metallic scrape ripped across the roof of my car, sharp as claws against steel. Both of us screamed. I floored the gas pedal without thinking, tires squealing as I shot forward. Laura stood frozen by her car, eyes wide in the headlights before she jumped inside. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't breathe until we were blocks away, the sound of the scrape still echoing in my head. I knew then that whatever was out there, it wasn't done with us. When I pulled up outside Laura's apartment, my hands were still shaking on the wheel. I didn't even remember most of the drive, just the blur of streetlights and the way my rearview mirror felt like a trap. Like if I stared too long, I'd see something there that I wasn't ready for. Laura sat silent in the passenger seat. She had insisted I drive her home after that scrape on the roof, and I didn't argue. She wasn't the type to scare easy, but the look on her face said she'd felt the same raw terror I had. When we finally parked, she exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for miles. "Marcus, you heard that, right? I mean, you felt it too?" I nodded. My throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. She rubbed her arms even though the car was warm. "Something dragged across your roof. It wasn't a branch, it wasn't nothing." The way she said something gave me chills. Neither of us could name it, so we didn't. I waited until she got safely inside before I drove off again. My apartment wasn't far, just a little studio near campus with peeling paint and a leaky sink. I thought maybe if I went straight to bed I could sleep it off and wake up with some kind of explanation. Maybe kids were messing with us. Maybe it was just paranoia twisting sounds into monsters. But when the morning came, sunlight cutting across my blinds, the truth hit harder. I walked out to the parking lot with my backpack slung over one shoulder, planning to head to class. That's when I saw it. 4 deep gashes ran across the roof of my car, jagged and uneven, as if something had dug in and tried to hold on. My chest went cold, and then I saw the paper. A folded piece of notebook paper was tucked under my windshield wiper. My stomach flipped as I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, but the words were clear. "We see you. We wait." I stood there frozen, cars and neighbors moving around me like nothing was wrong. But in that moment, the whole world felt off balance. I shoved the paper in my pocket, skipped class, and locked myself inside. I didn't tell anyone, not even Laura. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that you feel hunted by shadows? That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car outside felt like it was for me. I kept seeing that figure by the trees, still as stone, waiting. The following week blurred into a mess of nerves and exhaustion. I still had shifts at Circle K, but I dreaded each one. The moment I walked through the doors, the hum of the lights and the smell of stale coffee felt heavier, like the store itself remembered what had happened. Laura avoided talking about it too. We pretended it was just another week, but every time we worked together, I caught her glancing at the front windows, her eyes flicking toward the tree line. Neither of us stayed in the parking lot after clocking out anymore. We'd leave fast, engines revving before the doors even shut. By Friday, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the scratches were some twisted prank, the note a scare from kids in the neighborhood. People do weird things at night, right? That night, I was sweeping near the coolers when Laura stiffened at the counter. "Marcus," she whispered. "Look." I turned. Across the parking lot by the same tree line, a tall shadow stood under the dim streetlight. It was back. Every hair on my body stood up. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, a late-night customer, but the way it stood there, too still, too deliberate, told me otherwise. Laura whispered, "Call someone." I grabbed my phone, but before I could dial, the figure stepped backward into the dark. Gone. We didn't speak the rest of the shift. We didn't need to. When 3 o'clock rolled around, I begged Laura to let me drive her home again. She agreed without a word. As I pulled out of the lot, I saw it in the rearview mirror, just for a second. A shape at the edge of the lot, watching us go. I pressed harder on the gas. The last straw came 2 weeks later. I was sitting in the store alone. Laura had called out sick, and for the first time, the silence felt suffocating. Every flicker of the lights, every creak of the roof set me on edge. Around 2:30 a.m. I heard it again, the thumpano on the roof. Louder this time. My heart raced. I gripped the counter and whispered to myself, "Don't go out there. Don't go." But I couldn't stop myself. I stepped outside, the air cool and sharp against my skin. I tilted my head up and froze. For just a heartbeat, silhouetted against the faint glow of the streetlight, I saw something crouched at the edge of the roof. Long, bent, wrong. Watching. I stumbled backward, fumbling with my keys, and locked myself in the store. My chest heaved, eyes darting from window to window. And then, another sound. Not from the roof this time, but from inside. A faint scrape against the stockroom door. That was it for me. I grabbed my bag, sprinted out, and didn't stop until I was in my car, tearing out of the lot. I quit 2 weeks later. Told my boss school was too much, that I couldn't balance the schedule anymore. He didn't fight me on it, but I never went back. To this day, when I drive down Oracle Road and past that Circle K, I can't look at it. My chest tightens, and I hear that scrape in my head all over again. Some nights when I'm alone, I wonder if whatever stood out there that night was waiting for me specifically, or if it just waits for anyone foolish enough to notice it. What happened to me taught me something I carry even now. Not every danger in life comes with a name or a face. Sometimes it's the unknown, the unexplainable, that tests us most. Fear can push us to ignore our instincts or to dismiss what we know is real. But those instincts exist for a reason. Trust them. I don't know what was out there that October night, and maybe I never will, but I learned this. When something inside you says leave, listen. It just might save you. Looking back now, I know I should have trusted my gut from the very beginning. But when you're 24, broke, and living in Las Vegas, where the rent keeps climbing like the desert heat in July, instincts start to take a back seat to survival. I wasn't supposed to be a convenience store clerk. I had a degree in graphic design, or at least most of one. I left school a semester early when the money ran out. I pieced together freelance work where I could, logos for small businesses, flyers for clubs on the strip, little projects that kept me afloat but never paid enough on time. When my rent jumped $200 a month, I had to swallow my pride and take whatever job would keep me off the street. That's how I ended up at Circle K on West Charleston. The graveyard shift was open, the manager barely asked questions, and the paycheck, while nothing glamorous, was steady. I told myself it was temporary, just until something better came along. But every night as the clock crept past midnight and the world outside the glass doors grew quieter, I felt a gnawing unease I couldn't quite shake. The thing about working nights in Vegas is you see everything. Strung out tourists, drunk college kids, cab drivers grabbing coffee at 3 a.m., truckers with stories you don't want to hear. Most people kept to themselves, but sometimes you got the ones who lingered too long, who stared too much. That night, Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019, started like any other. The hum of the refrigerators in the back, the smell of burnt coffee in the air, my playlist buzzing quietly through one earbud while I restocked bags of chips. It was just me and the buzzing neon lights outside. Around 2:30 a.m., the door chimed. A man walked in, tall, greasy hair, leather jacket that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. His boots scraped against the tile with every step. I greeted him with the usual forced smile. "Beer section?" His voice was flat, almost mechanical, like he was just checking off a box on a list. "Back left," I told him, pointing. But instead of heading straight there, he moved slowly, his eyes dragging across the shelves, then back to me. He walked the aisles with no hurry, no real purpose, just watching. I busied myself with the chips, pretending not to notice, but my skin prickled under his gaze. After a few minutes, he left without buying anything, the door slamming harder than it needed to. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. People wander in and out all the time, I told myself. Some of them are weird. That's life on the night shift. But an hour later, while sweeping by the door, I glanced outside, and my stomach dropped. There he was, standing in the middle of the parking lot, face turned directly toward me. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. When I stepped closer, his breath fogged the glass. I whispered, "Please, just go." And then, like a scene from a nightmare, he bolted, straight into the shadows. The broom clattered from my hands. For the rest of the shift, I locked the doors and kept a baseball bat behind the counter. The next night, I couldn't bring myself to walk home alone. My apartment wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute walk if I cut across Charleston, but every shadow looked different after that night. Every car idling too long at the stoplight felt like it could be him. So I asked Jessica, one of my coworkers, for a ride. She was older than me, a single mom who picked up shifts for extra cash. When I explained what happened, she frowned. Guys like that? They hang around these places. They wait for someone to be alone. Her words sank into me like stones. But by the weekend, I tried convincing myself it was just a fluke. A creepy guy, sure, but maybe he'd moved on. Maybe I was blowing it out of proportion. 2 nights later, my friends invited me out for late pancakes at a small diner off Sahara. The kind of place where the booths are cracked vinyl and the coffee tastes like motor oil, but it's open all night. I figured it would be good for me, something normal. We were laughing about old stories from high school when the bell above the diner door jingled. I didn't look up right away. Not until the air shifted and my friends went quiet. "Hannah," one of them whispered. And there he was, sitting alone in a booth across the room. Same greasy hair, same leather jacket, but this time there was no mistaking it. His eyes locked on me from the moment he walked in. He didn't glance at a menu. He didn't look at the waitress, just me. My fork clattered against the plate. "It's him," I whispered. "Call the cops," my friend urged. I did. I called right there, hands shaking as I explained, but by the time 2 officers showed up, the booth was empty. He was gone. "Could be coincidence," one of the cops said, scribbling notes. "You sure it's the same guy?" "Yes, I'm sure." They promised to keep an eye out, but their tone told me they'd already moved on in their heads. To them, it was just another drunk, another night in Vegas. To me, it was something else. A warning. That night, as I lay awake in bed, every creak of the walls felt like footsteps. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The following week, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was slowly being split into before and after. Before that man walked into the store, my nights were just long shifts and tired mornings. After he appeared, every routine felt like a trap I was stuck in, predictable and exposed. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia. Vegas was full of people who looked rough around the edges. Maybe I was just hypersensitive. But then something happened that stripped away every excuse I'd been giving myself. It was a Thursday night, about 3 a.m. The store had been dead for hours. I was restocking the refrigerated drinks, the glass door fogging under my hand, when Jessica's voice cut through from the counter. "Hannah," she hissed. I turned, and the blood drained from my face. Through the wide front windows, we both saw him. The man in the leather jacket, crouched low beside my car parked under the flickering light of the lot. His hand gripped a metal tool, wedged against the driver's side door handle. He was trying to pry it open. My chest clenched. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Jessica slammed her hand against the glass and yelled, "Hey!" The man's head jerked up. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. The hollow cheeks, the sharp jaw, the wildness in his eyes. His stare locked with mine for a split second before he bolted into the darkness, disappearing between the empty lots and scrubby trees behind the station. We called the police. This time, they actually came quickly. 2 officers walked the perimeter, flashlights sweeping over the gravel and trash. But of course, he was gone. 1 officer crouched by my car door, shining his light. "He was working on this," the officer muttered. "You're lucky your coworker spotted him. He wasn't here to steal change out of your cup holder. He had something else in mind." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I gave a statement, describing the man as best as I could. Tall, greasy hair, leather jacket, boots. They nodded, wrote it down, promised they'd keep an eye on the area. But when they left, Jessica turned to me, her face tight. "You need to quit this job," she said flatly. "I can't," I whispered. "I need the money." She leaned closer. "No amount of money is worth this." That night, when I got home, I locked every door and pushed a chair under the handle. Sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying the image of him crouched by my car, waiting, working. If Jessica hadn't seen him, if I'd walked out at the end of my shift like usual, I didn't want to finish that thought. The manager wasn't much help. When I told him what happened, his first reaction was annoyance, like my fear was a disruption to his schedule. "We can't just give you time off every time some creep walks through the parking lot," he said. "This isn't just a creep," I shot back. "He followed me. He was trying to get into my car." The manager sighed. "Always find someone else. File a report with HR if you want. But if you can't handle nights, I can." It was a slap in the face. My fear was just a liability to him, a problem that got in the way of staffing his graveyard shifts. I wanted to quit right there, but reality weighed heavier. The rent, the bills, the student loan payments that never stopped. So I kept working, but I changed my habits. I parked directly under the lights. I carried pepper spray in my pocket. I made Jessica or one of the other coworkers walk me to my car. For a while, nothing happened. Nights blurred into each other, each one heavy with anticipation. I was always listening for the door chime, always watching the windows for a face pressed against the glass. Then, 2 weeks later, I learned just how far this man was willing to go. I had the night off, and a couple friends dragged me to the same diner where I'd seen him before. I didn't want to go, but they insisted. "You need to live your life," they said. It was almost midnight when my friend leaned across the booth, her face pale. "Hannah," she whispered. I didn't want to turn, but I did. He was there again, sitting at the counter this time, leather jacket draped across the stool. His hands wrapped around a coffee cup, but he never drank from it. His eyes never left me. I felt my throat tighten. "I'm calling the police," my friend said, fumbling for her phone. But the man must have sensed it because he slid off the stool and walked out before she could finish dialing. By the time officers arrived again, he was gone. One of them shook his head. "Guys like this, they circle. They test boundaries. But until he does something worse, there's only so much we can do." Something worse. The phrase rattled inside me like a warning bell. That night, I didn't sleep at all. 2 weeks later, I quit the job. I told my manager I couldn't take the night shifts anymore, and he shrugged like it was no big deal. But the truth is, I didn't quit because of him. I quit because of me. Because I finally realized I wasn't safe, and no paycheck in the world was worth ignoring that fact. The last straw came one night, around 4 a.m. I was closing up with Jessica, and for once, we were laughing about something stupid. A customer who'd tried to pay for cigarettes with foreign coins. It felt normal for just a moment. Then as we stepped into the parking lot together, I froze. There was a car across the street, engine idling, headlights off. I couldn't see the driver, but every instinct told me it was him. Watching. Waiting. I didn't even go to my car. Jessica drove me home, and I called the manager the next morning to quit. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every sound. Every knock at the door made my chest tighten. Even now, years later, I still check my mirrors whenever I drive home late. I never saw him again. But sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, lurking in another parking lot, choosing another woman to watch. What I learned from those nights is simple but unshakable. Your instincts are there to protect you, and ignoring them can cost you more than you think. Fear isn't weakness, it's information. The world has people in it who prey on vulnerability, who look for cracks in routine and moments when you doubt yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Speak up. Ask for help. Change your patterns. Don't let anyone make you feel like your safety is inconvenient, because no job, no paycheck, no pride is worth risking the one thing you can't replace: your life. Long before that February night at Circle K, my life had already been running on empty. My name's Stacy Carter, 24, born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, and if I'm being honest, I don't remember the last time I wasn't tired. Not the kind of tired where you need an extra nap or another cup of coffee. I mean the kind of tired that sits in your bones, like a permanent weight you carry around, one that makes your body ache even when you're standing still. My mom and I had been running a little laundry business for years, tucked between a pawn shop and a thrift store off Speedway Boulevard. It wasn't much, but it kept the lights on. After my dad left, I didn't have the luxury of daydreaming about a different life. Somebody had to pick up the slack, and that somebody was me. I worked mornings at the laundromat with Mom, then clocked in nights at Mel's Diner, just down the street. Double shifts, 7 days a week, with no promise that any of it would add up to something better. My younger brother, Caleb, was the reason I kept going. He was 20, with a sharp mind and this wild dream of becoming a mechanical engineer. He had a scholarship to community college, but it didn't cover everything. Tuition, books, gas money, it all added up. I never told him how much I struggled to keep him afloat. He didn't need to carry that guilt. If he had a shot at a real future, then my sleepless nights were worth it. Ryan, my boyfriend, was the one part of my life that never seemed steady. We'd been together 3 years, but lately we were more like two trains running on separate tracks. He worked odd hours, hauling sound gear for clubs, and he had big dreams about becoming a music producer. I admired him for chasing passion, but I couldn't ignore how different our paths were. I wanted stability, something I could count on, but Ryan always seemed like he was chasing something just out of reach. Still, we tried. Love, or what was left of it, kept us tethered. I guess that's why I didn't think twice about waiting for him that night. February 26th, 2018, just past midnight. I'd finished my shift at Mel's and crossed over to the Circle K for hot chocolate. I was too exhausted to even think about walking home, and Ryan had promised he'd pick me up after unloading at a club downtown. The Circle K on Speedway was just like every other convenience store. Bright lights, cheap coffee, aisles stacked with chips and candy. Safe enough, I thought. But that night, things felt off from the moment I walked in. The place was nearly empty, just the cashier half asleep at the counter and a homeless guy outside digging through the trash. I leaned against the snack aisle, sipping hot chocolate, scrolling through my phone. Nothing unusual, until the sliding doors hissed open, though no one entered. The cashier glanced up, eyebrows pinched, then went back to his register. I froze for a second, half expecting someone to walk in, But nothing. Just silence, and that cold blast of desert air seeping inside. I shook it off, told myself Tucson nights were always strange. Still, something in my gut twisted, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt like the night had just turned a corner. Ryan pulled into the lot a few minutes later, headlights cutting across the pavement. I remember how pale he looked as he hurried inside, like he'd seen something that knocked the wind out of him. "Stacy," he whispered, gripping my arm. "I just saw someone jump off the roof." I blinked at him. "What?" "Off the roof of Circle K." I heard the thud, swear to God. But when I ran around the side, nobody was there. His voice was shaky, his eyes darting toward the ceiling as if expecting to see someone still perched there. I frowned, part of me wanting to laugh it off. Ryan was known to get overtired and dramatic after long nights. "Babe, you're exhausted. You probably—" "I know what I saw," he cut in. His hand squeezed mine tighter than I liked. "Up there. There was someone I wanted to argue, but then the coffee machine sputtered behind the counter, switching on by itself. Hot liquid gushed out, spilling across the counter. The cashier cursed, rushing over with paper towels, muttering under his breath. I watched him bend, mop, then stand again, only for his eyes to snap toward the cooler section. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. At the back of the store, half shrouded in the doorway to the storage room, stood a figure. Tall, thin, perfectly still. Not a customer, not an employee, just a shadow with edges too sharp to be a trick of the light. My breath hitched, and I clutched Ryan's arm. "Tell me you see that," I whispered. Ryan's face went pale. He nodded slowly. The figure tilted its head just slightly, like it was studying us. I swear I could feel it staring straight into my chest. The cashier, voice shaky, muttered, I need a smoke break." Without another word, he rushed out the door, leaving us alone with whatever was lurking at the back of the store. My pulse pounded. Ryan's grip on me tightened. Neither of us spoke as the silence grew heavier. Then Ryan tugged at me. "We're leaving. Now." We bolted. The automatic doors hissed open, and we stumbled into the night air. Ryan yanked the car door open, started the engine with shaking hands. Tires screeched as we pulled out of the lot. I couldn't stop myself. I looked back. The store lights flickered violently, almost strobing. And there, crouched on the roof, was the figure, its white glowing eyes fixed on us, unblinking as we sped away. The car ride home was silent, except for the pounding of my heart. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, jaw clenched, refusing to talk. I wanted to ask what he thought we'd seen, but the words caught in my throat. For once, Ryan didn't want to tell a story. He just drove like the devil was chasing us. When we finally pulled into my apartment lot, Ryan killed the engine and leaned back in his seat. His face was pale, damp with sweat. "I don't want to talk about it," he muttered. "Ryan." "No, Stacy. Not tonight. Not ever." He turned to me, eyes wide, to that Circle K. "Promise me you won't go back?" I wanted to argue, but exhaustion drowned me. I nodded. "Okay, I promise." But sleep didn't come easy. Lying in bed, I kept hearing the sliding doors hissing open, the sputter of the coffee machine, the weight of glowing eyes on me, and the memory of my bike being stolen, the knocks at the door weeks earlier. It all felt connected now, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. Something wasn't just happening. Something was following me. The next few days blurred together. I worked, I slept in fits, I helped Mom at the laundromat. But everywhere I went, I felt it. That sensation of being watched. Walking home from the diner, I'd hear footsteps a few paces behind me, only to turn and see nothing. At the laundromat, customers swore they saw someone waiting outside after closing, but when we checked, no one was there. Ryan avoided the subject completely. Anytime I brought it up, he shut me down. "Don't feed it," he'd say. "Don't give it more attention." But his hands trembled when he said it, like he knew more than he was letting on. The breaking point came 3 nights later, I'd stayed late at Mel's to cover a shift, and when I got home, my front door was wide open. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was touched. Just the door, hanging ajar, like someone wanted me to know they'd been inside. I packed a bag and went to Ryan's place that night. I couldn't sleep in that apartment anymore. Weeks passed. I avoided the Circle K. I never walked home alone, but the feeling never left me. One evening, Ryan finally broke his silence. "You know," he said quietly, "this isn't the first time I've seen something like that. Back in high school, me and some friends saw, I don't even know what, a shadow with eyes like fire. Same kind of thing." He rubbed his face. "It followed me for months. Then one day it just stopped, like it found somebody else to latch onto." The way he said it made my blood run cold. "Ryan," I whispered, "what if that somebody's me?" He didn't answer. I never saw the figure again, not clearly, but I felt it. In the silence between footsteps, in the flicker of store lights, in the way strangers looked over my shoulder like they sensed someone else standing behind me. And to this day, I still don't know if it was bad luck, a haunting, or just the kind of paranoia exhaustion breeds. But one thing's certain, some shadows don't stay behind. They follow. Life will always weigh us down: work, money, responsibility, heartbreak. When you're running on empty, the world feels darker, scarier, and sometimes even ordinary places become dangerous. The shadows we carry, stress, fear, exhaustion, can twist reality until it feels like something is always following us. The truth is, we can't run forever. We have to face our fears, draw boundaries, and take care of ourselves before the shadows consume us. I've never been much of a risk taker. Growing up in Dallas, my parents made sure of that. My dad was the kind of man who believed life was a ladder, and you either climbed every rung in order or you fell and never got back up. There wasn't any in between. He had a saying he liked to repeat every time I did something he considered pointless. "Don't waste your time, Evan. Do something useful." I heard it so often it felt tattooed on my brain. By the time I was 21, I was balancing college classes with part-time work, trying to live up to his expectations but never really feeling like myself. Then there was Carter Hall, my opposite in every way. Carefree, reckless, always laughing even when he had no reason to. Carter never stayed at a job for long. He'd sling boxes at a warehouse one week and clean carpets the next, always chasing quick cash, never planning beyond Friday. My parents didn't like him, but to me, Carter was freedom. He wasn't weighed down by a voice telling him he wasn't enough. When the idea came up to road trip from Dallas to Denver to see some old college friends, I hesitated. 15 hours of open highway, just the two of us. Nothing but gas station coffee and Carter's awful playlists. My dad would have said it was irresponsible, a waste of money. But I said yes. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I could do something reckless without the world collapsing. The first few hours were fine. Carter drove us out of Dallas, then I took over through the long, empty stretches of North Texas. By the time the clock hit close to midnight on July 22, 2016, I was running on fumes. My eyes burned from staring at the highway lines, my head throbbing with every mile. Carter saw me fading and offered to take the wheel. "Man, you look like death," he said, yawning himself. "Ditch. Switch with me before you put us in a..." I didn't argue. We pulled over, swapped seats, and I leaned back, trying to nap while Carter cranked up some classic rock. Sleep didn't come easy. The AC rattled, the bass thumped, and every time I closed my eyes, my dad's voice crept in. "Why are you wasting your money on this trip? What are you even doing with your life?" I drifted in and out until Carter's muttered curse jolted me awake. His eyes darted to the dashboard. The gas gauge needle sat firmly on empty. "You've got to be kidding me," I groaned, sitting up straight. "Relax," he said, trying to smile. "We'll find a station." But it was too late. The car sputtered, lurched, and rolled to a dead stop on the shoulder of Highway 287, just outside Wichita Falls. The night was thick and heavy, the kind of silence where you could hear the insects buzzing. Only the occasional roar of a semi-truck broke it. Carter smacked the steering wheel. "All right, my bad. I saw a Circle K on the GPS about 4 miles ahead. I'll hoof it, grab a can of gas, be back in half an hour." I wanted to argue, to remind him it was his fault for not checking the gauge, but I just sighed. "Fine. I'll stay here. Don't take forever." He grinned like it was an adventure. "Don't worry, Mom." Then he slung his backpack over his shoulder and headed off into the black horizon, leaving me alone with nothing but the cicadas and the faint glow of taillights disappearing down the road. At first, the silence felt almost peaceful. I locked the doors, reclined my seat, and told myself Carter would be back before I knew it. But the minutes stretched longer than I expected. Every shadow along the roadside looked sharper. Every sound outside made me sit up. I tried calling him, but the signal kept cutting out. Wichita Falls wasn't exactly known for cell towers, and out on that stretch of 287, my phone might as well have been a paperweight. Then I saw headlights in the rearview mirror. A dark sedan crept up from behind, slowing as it reached my stranded car. For a second, I thought maybe luck was on my side. Someone was stopping to help. But instead of pulling over, the car lingered next to me, matching my position like it was studying me. My pulse hammered. Then, without warning, it rolled forward and kept going, taillights shrinking into the dark. I let out a shaky breath, trying to laugh at myself. "Not every car is a serial killer, Evan," I muttered. 5 minutes later, the same sedan came back. This time slower. My stomach twisted. It crawled past, its windows tinted black, impossible to see inside. My fingers tightened around my phone. I thought about calling 911, but what would I even say? A car drove by twice. The sedan disappeared again, but the dread stayed. I tried Carter's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, my nerves buzzing louder than the cicadas. Another 10 minutes passed before the sedan returned. This time it stopped. Just a few yards ahead of me, its brake lights glowed red, like two unblinking eyes. It sat there, idling, as if waiting for me to make a move. I ducked low in my seat, heart pounding. I didn't know what the hell this was, but every instinct screamed that I wasn't safe. After what felt like forever, the car finally pulled off again, melting into the night. That was the breaking point. I couldn't sit there like bait. I climbed out, shoved my phone in my pocket, and started jogging down the highway toward the Circle K, praying I'd catch up with Carter. The night air was thick, the stars hazy above me, every step echoing against the stillness. After 15 minutes, I froze. A faint ringtone buzzed from the weeds off the shoulder. Carter's ringtone. My chest tightened as I pushed through the grass, and there he was, crouched low, eyes wide, clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. "Get down," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "Don't let them see you." "What the hell are you doing?" I whispered harshly, crouching beside him. Carter's face was pale, his voice shaking. "That car, it pulled over when I was walking. Guy rolled down his window, told me to get in, said he'd give me a ride. I told him no, but he wouldn't leave me alone. He kept circling back." I felt the blood drain from my face. "It's the same one. He's been stopping by my car too." Carter nodded quickly, his eyes darting to the highway. "He's looking for us." Right on cue, the low hum of an engine returned. Headlights swept across the road as the sedan crawled past again, slower than ever. We both pressed ourselves into the grass, holding our breath as the lights washed over us. For a terrifying moment, I swore they lingered right where we were, as if the driver knew. Then they drifted forward, disappearing once more into the dark. We didn't wait. As soon as the sound faded, Carter grabbed my arm. "Run." We sprinted down the highway, lungs burning, legs pumping with adrenaline. The glow of the Circle K sign finally appeared in the distance, flickering like a beacon. I'd never been so relieved to see fluorescent lights in my life. We burst through the doors, startling the cashier behind the counter. He gave us a look like we were crazy, but I didn't care. "Call the cops," I gasped, my chest heaving. There's someone out there. The cashier frowned but picked up the phone. Within minutes, a patrol car rolled up. The officers listened, nodding grimly. One of them sighed and said, "We've had a few reports like this. Some guy in a dark sedan harassing stranded drivers. Never managed to catch him." That didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it proved what we'd seen wasn't just paranoia. The cops gave us a ride back to the car, filled our tank enough to reach the station, and told us to stick to populated stops the rest of the night. Carter tried to laugh it off, but his hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "You believe me now?" he asked, exhaling smoke into the night air. "Yeah," I muttered. My voice was flat, my mind racing. "I believe you." The drive back on the highway was tense. Every pair of headlights in the distance made my heart hammer. I kept checking the mirrors, half convinced the sedan was still behind us. Carter cranked the radio louder than necessary, but neither of us really spoke. When we finally crossed into Colorado the next afternoon, we pretended everything was fine. We met up with friends, laughed, drank cheap beer, tried to make it feel like the trip had been worth it. But every time I saw taillights glow red on the road, my chest tightened. That night in Denver, lying awake on a friend's couch, I realized it wasn't just the fear of what had happened. It was the reminder of how fragile everything was. Safety felt like something solid before that night. Now I knew it could vanish in an instant, shattered by a stranger on an empty road. Years have passed since that trip, but I still think about it. About how close danger came without warning, how quickly the night turned from ordinary to nightmare. Carter still laughs when he tells the story, playing it off like one of our wild road trip adventures. But for me, it left a scar. Sometimes I wonder if I would have even believed him that night if I hadn't seen the car myself. I was always the cautious one, the worrier. My dad called me soft for it. But maybe worry is what kept us alive. Maybe paranoia is just another word for paying attention. Now, whenever I drive at night, I plan my stops carefully. I don't let the gas dip below half a tank. And when I see brake lights glowing in the dark, I keep my distance. Because the truth is, you never know who's behind the wheel or what they're looking for. Danger doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it's just a stranger's headlights on a lonely road. That night taught me the importance of preparation, awareness, and trust in your instincts. Safety is fragile, and taking it for granted is a mistake you may not get the chance to correct. Always pay attention, always be ready, and never ignore the voice inside that tells you something isn't right. I never liked December drives. The cold has a way of crawling into your bones and clinging there no matter how high you crank the heater. That winter of 2017, I was 20 years old, a sophomore at Arizona State, and I had convinced myself I was tough enough to make the 12-hour drive from Phoenix to Reno in one shot. Motel money felt like a waste when I could just sleep in my car at a truck stop. Besides, I told myself I needed to toughen up. Life wasn't exactly giving me much comfort those days. My parents had divorced the year before, and home didn't feel like home anymore. My mom begged me to come up for winter break early, to make the place feel less hollow without my dad. But I dragged my feet. Truth was, I didn't know how to exist in that house without both of them there. I figured showing up late was better than not showing up at all. I left Phoenix late in the evening, my beat-up Honda humming steady under me. At first I felt fine. The desert night stretched wide and black, stars scattered like salt across the sky. But by the time I hit the northern edge of Arizona, exhaustion had started to gnaw at me. Hours earlier, a snowstorm had rolled through near Flagstaff, slowing traffic to a crawl. I'd gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached, every spin out on the shoulder reminding me how fragile control really was. Somewhere near a rest stop outside Prescott, a group of drunk guys had stumbled up to my car. They knocked on the glass, slurring about needing gas money. I shook my head, kept my doors locked. One of them smacked the window with his palm and laughed, but they eventually staggered away. I told myself it was nothing, but the unease clung to me like smoke. By the time the Circle K appeared along Highway 93 near Kingman, glowing like a lighthouse in the desert, I was desperate. My hands hurt from gripping the wheel, my eyes burned, and the thought of a bathroom and a bottle of water felt like heaven. Inside, the place was nearly empty. A hum from the refrigerators filled the silence, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. I grabbed a drink and made my way to the register. That's when I noticed him. He stood leaning against the counter, denim jacket frayed at the sleeves, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee like it was the only thing tethering him to the ground. His hair was greasy, his beard patchy, and his eyes... God, his eyes never left me. I glanced up and caught his stare. He smiled, just a twitch of the mouth, crooked and strange, like he knew something I didn't. I forced myself to look away, fumbling cash at the counter, muttering a thank you to the clerk. I told myself he was just another late-night drifter, another face on the road. I'd seen plenty of them before, but something about that half-smile lodged in my head. Back in my car, I parked at the far end of the lot. I tilted my seat back, pulled my jacket over my chest, and closed my eyes. My body screamed for rest. The glass fogged with every breath, cocooning me in a small, hazy bubble. For a while, sleep came, but even then, that crooked smile followed me into my dreams. I don't know how long I was out, maybe an hour. When I woke, my throat was dry, and the air inside the car felt heavy. I rubbed at the condensation on the glass and froze. Headlights. A pickup had pulled into the lot, parking directly behind my Honda. Its engine rumbled steady, exhaust curling white into the cold night. My chest tightened as I leaned forward, trying to see through the mirrors. The driver wasn't moving. He just sat there. I told myself it couldn't be him. There were hundreds of people passing through Kingman on any given night, but when I tilted my head just enough, the truth set in like ice. It was him, the man from inside, same denim jacket, same face that had smiled at me. I turned back forward, heart pounding in my throat. Maybe he wasn't here for me. Maybe he was just another guy resting, same as I was. But then why park directly behind me when the entire lot was empty? The minutes dragged. He didn't move. I sat stiff, pretending not to notice, pretending not to care, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave. Finally, I turned the key, the Honda coughing awake. I put it in drive and rolled forward, headlights cutting across the asphalt. In the mirror, the pickup stayed where it was, idling, not following. I breathed out a laugh, shaky and thin. See? You're paranoid, Michael. Just tired. I pulled back onto the highway, the desert stretching endless in black. A few miles later, I spotted a turnout, one of those dirt lots where truckers sometimes stop. I told myself I'd just rest there for an hour, then finish the drive. I pulled in, killed the engine, and leaned back again, eyes heavy. Sleep hit fast. The crash came faster. A deafening smash shattered the silence, glass exploding across the back seat. I jolted upright, heart slamming into my ribs. Through the spiderweb of broken glass, a face leered at me. His face. Grinning, wild-eyed, swinging a metal baseball bat like it was an extension of his arm. Another swing cracked the other rear window. My hands fumbled with the keys, panic choking me. The bat slammed again, the car rocking under the blow. My engine roared to life as I slammed the gear shift into drive, tires spitting dirt as I shot back onto the highway. Behind me, headlights flared to life. He was coming. The highway blurred under my tires as I pushed the Honda harder than I ever had. My hands shook, the steering wheel slick with sweat. Every time I glanced in the mirror, those headlights were there, locked onto me like a predator chasing prey. I dialed 911, voice breaking as the dispatcher answered. "This is Michael Turner," I gasped. "My car. He's chasing me in a pickup. I'm on Highway 93 heading north. Some guy just attacked." The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady. "Vehicle? Stay on the line, Michael. Can you describe the old pickup, rusty red, driver's male, white, maybe 40? He's got a bat. He smashed my windows. Please, he's right behind me. Keep driving toward a populated area if you can. Do not stop. Officers are being dispatched. My eyes darted across the dark horizon. That's when I saw it. A glow, faint at first, then brighter. Another Circle K, like a beacon in the endless desert. I swerved toward the exit, tires screeching. The pickup followed. As I barreled into the lot, I leaned on the horn, headlights flashing, desperate for anyone to see me. And by some miracle, the doors burst open. 2 men in plain clothes came running out, badges flashing at their belts. Off-duty cops. The sight of them was enough. The pickup skidded, then spun back toward the road, taillights vanishing into the night. I slammed on the brakes, stumbling out of the car, glass crunching under my shoes. My whole body trembled as I tried to speak. One officer put a steady hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, kid. We've got you." I gave my statement in a daze, words tumbling out between shivers. The officers exchanged glances as I described the man, the bat, the smile. One of them sighed. "We've had reports," he said quietly. "Drifter, been harassing people along the interstate. Smashes windows, tries to scare drivers. Nobody's caught him yet." That word, "yet," hung in the air like a curse. They radioed for backup, but the man was gone, swallowed by the desert. They offered to escort me to a nearby motel, but I refused. Stupid pride, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to get home, to put as much distance between me and that smile as possible. I drove north with my windows shattered, cold wind whipping through the car. Every red glow on the horizon, every shadow in my mirrors made my pulse spike. The drive to Reno had never felt longer. When I finally pulled into my mom's driveway the next afternoon, she hugged me tight, asking why I looked like I hadn't slept in days. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't. The fear still clung too close. That night, lying awake in my old bedroom, I kept seeing his face through the glass. That half smile in the fluorescent light of Circle K, that grin as the bat swung down. My body was safe, but my mind couldn't stop replaying the question, why me? Months passed before I drove that stretch of highway again. By then, the windows were repaired, the dents buffed out, the police reports filed away. But the fear lingered. Every time I pulled into a gas station late at night, I scanned the lot twice. I kept my phone charged, my gas tank full, and I never, ever parked in the back of a lot again. People told me I was lucky, and maybe I was. But lucky didn't erase the memory of glass shattering inches from my head. It didn't erase the way my hands shook when I thought about resting at a Circle K that night. I'll never know if he picked me at random, or if I'd been marked from the moment our eyes met inside that store. Sometimes I think about it when I see strangers in gas stations, how easy it is for someone to notice you, to follow you, to decide you're theirs to hunt. What stuck with me most wasn't the chase or the broken windows, it was the smile. That first quiet moment when I convinced myself I was imagining things. That was the moment I should have trusted myself. The road teaches you things you don't forget. I learned that danger doesn't always come screaming. It often comes smiling, subtle enough to make you doubt your instincts. Trust those instincts. Stay alert. Prepare for the unexpected, and never ignore the unease that rises in your gut. Safety is fragile, and sometimes survival depends on listening to the warning signs only you can feel. When I look back on my 20s, I don't remember much of the parties, friends, or wild nights people are supposed to have at that age. What I remember most is the constant hum of the fluorescent lights at Circle K and the smell of burnt coffee that clung to my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. My name is Laura Bennett, and when I was 26, I thought my life had been decided for me. I was supposed to be finishing community college, getting my degree in nursing, moving toward something better. But then my dad got sick. He'd been a mechanic all his life, proud of his hands and the grease under his fingernails. But when the cancer hit, he could barely lift a wrench. His treatments weren't cheap, and our insurance only stretched so far. My mom worked nights at a care home and my little sister was still in high school. That left me. I dropped my classes, tucked away my textbooks, and filled out an application at the Circle K on West Glendale Avenue. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I told myself it was just for a while, just until things settled down. But months passed, then half a year, and there I was, standing behind a counter in a red polo, ringing up cigarettes and coffee, trying not to feel like my life was slipping out from under me. Most mornings were easy enough. By 10 o'clock, the school traffic was over, the rush of commuters had passed, and the place got quiet. Truck drivers came in for fuel and cigarettes. Factory guys rolled up on their breaks. Moms stopped for a soda after dropping off kids. Boring was good. I wanted boring. But Circle K wasn't always boring. There had been moments that still stuck with me. Once, a man stood outside for nearly an hour, leaning against the ice machine, never buying anything, just staring at me through the glass every time I glanced up. Another time, a pack of teenagers cornered me near the freezer aisle, snickering and stepping too close, until another customer walked in and they scattered like cockroaches. Those nights I went home and scrubbed my skin raw in the shower, as if I could wash off the feeling of being watched. Still, I told myself I was strong enough. I had to be. Dad needed his medicine, and Mom needed someone to help with the bills. I kept my head down, counted change, made small talk with regulars, and prayed the hours would pass quietly. That Wednesday morning in May felt no different at first. The sun was bright and sharp. The store smelled faintly of donuts that had been sitting too long, and I was halfway through restocking the gum rack when I heard the deep rumble of a diesel engine pulling into the lot. I glanced out the window and saw a massive 18-wheeler rolling to a stop, its shadow swallowing half the pumps. A man climbed down tall, broad-shouldered, carrying a thermos the size of my arm. His boots hit the pavement hard. When he stepped inside, the automatic doors hissed and the smell of road dust and sweat followed him. He smiled at me, slow and deliberate like he already knew me. "Coffee, sweetheart?" he asked, though the coffee station was directly behind him. Something in the way he said it, too easy, too familiar, made my stomach twist. At first, I told myself not to overthink it. I'd dealt with plenty of men who thought a cashier in a red polo was their personal entertainment. You learn to fake a smile, keep your answers short, and pray they leave without making a scene. He moved to the coffee pots, his hands surprisingly shaky for someone built like a linebacker. He asked me too many questions while he poured. "You local? You here alone? Place always this quiet?" Each question landed heavy. I answered in clipped sentences, polite but cold, my eyes flicking toward the door every time I heard it hiss. The store stayed quiet. No one else came in. Instead of leaving, he wandered the aisles. Pretending to browse, he lingered by the chips, then the energy drinks, circling back toward the counter but never committing to pay. Every time I glanced up, his eyes were already on me. "Bathroom in here?" he asked suddenly, though I'd just pointed it out 2 minutes earlier. His smile stretched wider. That's when the unease sharpened into something more. This wasn't boredom. This wasn't harmless small talk. He was circling, testing, waiting. Through the window, salvation appeared in the strangest form. Mark, one of the regulars from the factory down the road, had pulled up on his forklift for a soda. He was gruff, always smelled of oil and sweat, but he looked out for people. Our eyes met through the glass. I tilted my head toward the man, widened my eyes just slightly. Mark froze, reading me. Then he nodded, almost invisible, and disappeared inside the machine shop next door. The trucker finally made his way to the counter again, setting down his coffee, his gaze pinning me in place. "Slow morning, huh?" he said, leaning in too close. My hands trembled as I reached for the register, and that's when the door slammed open. Mark stormed in, his boots pounding against the tile. Without a word, he grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against the cooler so hard the bottles rattled. "What the hell are you doing here?" Mark growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Nobody notices you circling around." You think the man shoved back, but Mark was stronger. His fist twisted into that denim jacket, dragging him out the door before I even realized what was happening. I grabbed the phone, my fingers fumbling on the keypad as I dialed 911. My voice cracked as I told the dispatcher what had happened. Outside, I could see Mark shoving the man back toward his truck, yelling words I couldn't hear. The man scrambled inside, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot, tires screaming. When the police arrived, the store still felt thick with tension, the air charged like static before a storm. Mark stood outside smoking, arms crossed, muttering under his breath. I tried to steady my hands as I gave my statement, but my voice betrayed me, wavering like a scared child. The officers asked what he looked like. Tall, broad, denim jacket, greasy blonde hair. They asked what he drove. An 18-wheeler, empty trailer, out-of-state plates I hadn't caught. One of the cops looked at the other, something unspoken passing between them. "Sounds like the guy we've been hearing about," he said finally. "Truck driver recently out on parole. He's wanted in Missouri for violating conditions. Stolen handgun was reported tied to his vehicle last week." The words sank into me like lead. My legs went weak. He hadn't just been some lonely trucker killing time. He had been hunting. The officer kept talking about reports from other Circle Ks along the interstate, clerks who felt uneasy but hadn't had proof, places where he'd lingered too long and then vanished. "He's been scouting," the cop said flatly. "Lucky. Looking for stores with women working alone. You got lucky." The word tasted bitter. I nodded through the rest of their questions, but inside I felt hollow. Lucky meant I'd almost been something else. A story on the evening news. A missing poster on the gas station door. When they finally left, I stood behind the counter, staring at the gum rack I'd been restocking that morning. The hum of the coolers filled the silence. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. After that day, I couldn't work a shift alone anymore. I told my manager flat out. He argued at first, said the budget couldn't stretch, but I didn't care. I'd rather quit than stand behind that counter again by myself, waiting for the doors to hiss open. Mark checked in more often after that. He never mentioned the fight, never asked if I was okay, just showed up for his soda and gave me a nod. That was enough. At home, I tried to act normal for my family's sake. I smiled at my sister, asked about her homework, teased her about prom dresses. But at night, I lay awake listening to every creak of the house, every car passing on the street, afraid that trucker would somehow find me again. The image that haunted me most wasn't him slamming the door or peeling out of the lot. It was the way he smiled when he walked in, like he already owned the space, like he'd already decided how the story would end. Years have passed since that morning, but even now when I pass a Circle K, I can hear the hiss of the automatic doors and feel my stomach tighten. I still see the shadow of that 18-wheeler rolling into the lot, still feel the weight of his questions pressing down on me. I kept working for a while, but eventually I found another job, one where I wasn't alone behind glass and bright lights. My dad's health worsened, and my responsibilities only grew heavier. But that day at Circle K never left me. It taught me how fragile normal can be. One moment you're restocking gum, the next you're staring down the possibility of disappearing. What saved me wasn't luck alone. It was instinct, that gut-deep certainty that something was wrong, and the courage to reach for help, even in silence. If Mark hadn't read me, if I'd kept pretending everything was fine, the ending might have been very different. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it walks in with a smile and asks about the coffee. The world teaches you early to brush off unease, to be polite, to doubt yourself. But the truth is this: your instincts exist for a reason. Trust them. Speak up, reach out, take action. It might feel small in the moment, but it could be the choice that saves your life. I've never been the type of person who likes to stop on the road. Long drives to me were about powering through, keeping the music loud, and convincing myself that coffee and gas station snacks were all the fuel I really needed. Maybe it was a stubborn streak, maybe it was pride. Either way, I always thought of pit stops as weaknesses, the places where bad things happened in between the stretches of highway. That Sunday night, September 3rd, 2017, I was 27 years old, driving back from Los Angeles after visiting my brother. He'd been helping me through a rough patch, something I hadn't admitted out loud to many people. Life had been stagnant. My job was going nowhere, my bills kept piling up, and the small apartment I called home felt like a box closing in on me. I told myself the late-night drives between cities were therapeutic. Truth was, they were the only time I felt like I could breathe. The trip from LA to Bakersfield wasn't the longest in the world, but it was lonely at night, especially when you left the main sprawl behind. I liked the way the lights faded into black desert, but I hated the silence that came with it. Silence when you're alone too long starts to feel alive. By the time I hit Lancaster, the gas gauge had dipped far too close to empty. I cursed under my breath. I knew I should have stopped earlier, but I'd pushed it as usual. That's when I spotted the neon glow of a Circle K on the edge of a strip mall. Its red sign buzzed against the dark sky, almost like a lighthouse. Relief washed over me. I pulled in, parked by the pump, and shut off the engine. The lot was mostly empty, just one or two cars scattered near the side. Inside, the place felt quiet. Too quiet for a Sunday night. A tired-looking teenager worked the register, his hoodie hanging loose, eyes fixed on the counter as if he'd been counting down the minutes till closing. And there was someone else. A man stood in the corner near the ATM, hood pulled low, shoulders hunched. He didn't move when I walked in, didn't look up, just stood there, his presence heavy even though he said nothing. I nodded out of reflex, the way you do when you don't want to seem rude, but his response was silence. I grabbed an energy drink from the cooler, trying to ignore the way my skin prickled. When I stepped up to the counter, the cashier barely spoke, sliding the bottle across the scanner. The hooded man hadn't budged. Something about that silence followed me as I walked back out into the night. I popped the cap off the bottle, took a swig, and muttered to myself about how tired I felt. The lot was still quiet, the pumps humming softly. I climbed into my car and started the engine, but before shifting into gear, I heard it. Quick footsteps on gravel, sharp and deliberate. My head snapped up. Nobody was near. The pumps were empty, the lot still. I exhaled, shaking it off. Maybe it was the hum of the refrigeration units, maybe just my nerves playing tricks. I put the car in drive. That's when movement caught my eye. The hooded man from inside stepped out from behind the ice machine, emerging slowly, his head tilted just enough to let me know his eyes were locked on me. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. The weight of his stare was enough. My chest tightened. My hand darted to the lock button, clicking the doors shut. I forced my eyes forward, pretending I hadn't seen him, and eased out of the lot. Relief flickered for half a second, until headlights flared in my rearview mirror. A car pulled out of the lot, red paint dulled and scratched under the streetlights. An old sedan. My stomach sank as the realization hit. The hooded man was behind the wheel. Great, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I meant to. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. He just happened to leave when I did. But the excuses fell apart quickly. Every move I made, he mirrored. When I switched lanes, so did he. When I slowed down, his headlights dimmed behind me. 10 miles out of Lancaster, he was still there, clinging to my bumper like a shadow I couldn't shake. I checked my phone. No bars. Typical for the desert edge of town. But that didn't stop the cold wash of dread that hit me. I whispered, trying to steady myself. Stay calm, just stay calm. But the longer it went on, the harder it was to believe. When I swerved toward an exit, hoping to throw him off, the sedan followed instantly. My pulse hammered in my ears. My grip on the wheel felt like stone. The desert stretched out on both sides of me. Nothing but blackness. If I stopped, if I slowed too much, I had no doubt he'd be out of that car in seconds. The thought chilled me more than the desert night air seeping through the window. The worst part wasn't the headlights in my mirror. It was the silence inside my car. the kind that made my heartbeat sound like a drum. I kept glancing between the road and the rear view, waiting for some sign he'd back off, but the sedan stayed tight, his grille nearly kissing my bumper. Every instinct screamed at me to speed up, but the highway was empty and dark, and the thought of losing control terrified me more than him. If I spun out here, nobody would find me for hours. So I did what I'd always done when I felt trapped. I started talking to myself. "Okay, Daniel," I muttered. "Think. Just think. Don't panic." I tried to convince myself that maybe I was paranoid, that this was just some reckless driver messing around, but deep down, I knew better. I'd felt his stare back at the Circle K. It wasn't casual, it wasn't random. He had been waiting, watching. My hands trembled as I rolled the window down just a crack, letting the cold desert air sting my face. I needed something sharp, something real to ground me. I thought about pulling over, letting him pass, but I knew he wouldn't. He wasn't tailing me because he wanted the road. He was tailing me because he wanted me. I scanned the dark horizon desperately for lights. Anything. A truck stop, another gas station, a late-night diner. Nothing. Just the flat, endless desert stretching forever. The red sedan suddenly surged closer, his high beams flooding my car. I cursed, squinting as the glare blinded me. My pulse spiked as he swerved left, then right, like he was testing how close he could get. That's when the fear shifted into anger. "Not tonight," I hissed, gripping the wheel. I took a sharp exit without signaling, tires squealing as I swerved off the freeway. My chest pounded as I watched in the mirror. The sedan followed without hesitation. My stomach dropped. The exit curved toward a service road, barren and unlit. He was still on me, engine growling behind my ears. That was when I saw it. A small blue sign with white letters, "Police Substation, 1 mile." I don't think I've ever thanked God so fast in my life. I floored it, pushing my old car harder than I ever had. The speedometer climbed, the engine whining in protest. The sign had given me hope, but the mile stretched endlessly, like the desert didn't want me to find safety. The sedan stayed glued to me, never losing ground. Every second was a war between fear and determination. My hands were slick with sweat, my chest tight. I prayed silently. "Just let me get there. Please let me get there." Finally, flashing security lights appeared ahead. The outline of a squat building came into view, American flag barely visible in the night breeze. Relief surged through me, so strong it made my throat ache. I swerved hard into the lot, horn blaring like a desperate cry. The car jerked as I slammed the brakes, tires screaming across the pavement. The red sedan slowed at the entrance, headlights sweeping over me. My heart stopped as I waited for him to follow me in. But then, he didn't. He paused, engine idling, his headlights burning into my windshield. Then, as if a switch flipped, he gunned it. The sedan roared past the station and vanished into the desert night. I sat frozen, every muscle locked. My chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, my hands still clamped around the steering wheel. I couldn't move, not until a figure stepped out of the building. A patrol officer, coffee cup in hand, had heard my tires and horn. He walked quickly toward me, eyes narrowing when he saw the shattered expression on my face. "You all right, son?" he asked. I stumbled out of the car, legs shaking, words tumbling out of me in gasps. I told him about the Circle K, the man at the ATM, the way he'd followed me, the chase. The officer listened quietly, nodding. When I finished, he sighed. "You're lucky you didn't stop anywhere dark. We've had complaints. Guys like that hang around gas stations, wait for people traveling alone. Sometimes they try to run folks off the road, sometimes worse." The thought made my stomach turn. I sat inside that substation for nearly an hour, giving a statement. They didn't catch the guy, of course. No license plate I could make out in the dark. No cameras out by the road, nothing to trace him by. Just my description. Red sedan. Old dented hooded driver. Another shadow in the night. When I finally got back on the highway, the road felt different. Every pair of headlights behind me set my nerves on edge. I checked my mirrors obsessively, half convinced he'd reappear at any second. Even when the road was clear, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being followed. That night changed me. For weeks, I avoided late-night stops altogether. I filled up my tank before sundown, stocked snacks in the back seat, refused to pull over in small towns I didn't know. Even now, years later, the memory clings to me. The quiet of that Circle K, the way his eyes seemed to choose me before I even realized it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that police sign hadn't been there. If I hadn't taken that exit at the exact moment I did. Would he have forced me off the road? Would I have disappeared into some dark patch of desert? Just another name on a missing persons report. I'll never know. But what I do know is this. The silence inside that Circle K wasn't harmless. It was patient. It was calculated. And it followed me out into the night, all the way to the edge of safety. Evil doesn't always announce itself with noise or threats. Sometimes it waits quietly, watching, choosing the moment when you feel most tired, most distracted, most alone. That night taught me that trust in your instincts isn't paranoia. It's survival. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And when you're out there on the road, especially at night, safety isn't about being fearless. It's about being smart enough to know when danger is circling and strong enough to steer yourself toward the light. My name is Emily Vargas, and if I'm honest, I never pictured myself working late shifts at a Circle K in Tucson, Arizona. Back in high school, I had bigger dreams, graphic design, maybe photography, something that let me tell stories without words. But life has a funny way of forcing you to take detours. By the time I was 26, I was juggling rent, overdue bills, and trying to help my younger sister get through community college. On top of that, my dad was sick, and hospital visits had drained more than just my energy. Money was always tight, and time even tighter. The Circle K on East Speedway Boulevard wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I'd been there almost a year, long enough to memorize the regulars' routines and predict which nights would be busy with college kids and which nights would drag on in silence. Most nights, the work was simple. Ring up smokes, scan energy drinks, swipe credit cards, and wipe down counters when no one was looking. The only hard part was the hours. By the time 10 o'clock rolled around, I was running on caffeine and stubbornness. That particular Tuesday night, April 7th, 2009, had already been long before my shift even began. I'd spent the morning at the hospital with my dad, holding his hand while doctors adjusted his oxygen and explained test results I couldn't fully follow. He'd squeezed my fingers, whispered that he was sorry for being a burden. I told him not to say that, even though part of me had been wondering how I'd pay next month's bills if he needed more care. Then I'd gone home, showered, and dragged myself into the store for another double shift. The night started ordinary enough. A couple of students came in for caffeine before cramming all night. A delivery driver grabbed gas and jerky, tossed a few bucks on the counter, and left with a nod. An older man bought cigarettes, barely speaking at all. The air outside was warm and dry, the kind of desert heat that clings even after sundown, and inside the store the AC hummed, giving the illusion of comfort. I remember leaning against the counter, rubbing my eyes and thinking about how badly I wanted to sleep. My mind drifted back to my dad, to the hospital's smell of antiseptic and stale air, to the weight of responsibility that pressed on me like a stone. I felt stretched thin, but at least the store was quiet. I thought maybe I'd make it through the shift without trouble. That's when he walked in. The man looked like he belonged anywhere but there. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Messy stubble on his chin, eyes that looked tired but too alert at the same time. He wore a dark hoodie, which stood out in the desert heat, and his jeans were creased with dirt. He moved slowly, like each step was deliberate. Nothing about him screamed danger right away, but something in my gut stirred as soon as I saw him. He went straight to the freezer section, stopped in front of the rows of sodas, and stood there. Didn't open the door, didn't even bend down to look closer. Just stood staring. At first I thought maybe he was deciding. People sometimes linger, debating Coke or Pepsi. But as the minutes ticked by, 5, then 10, I realized he wasn't choosing anything. He wasn't shopping at all, he was just watching. I cleared my throat, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. Something. "Hey, let me know if you need help finding." The man turned his head toward me, slow as if winding up. His lips curled into the faintest smile, and in a raspy voice that seemed too rehearsed, he said, "Just looking." The way he drew out the words made my stomach knot. I tried not to overthink it. People were weird sometimes. Maybe he was lost in thought or just tired. I stocked some candy bars by the counter, wiping down the shelves like I had a reason to stay busy. But every time I looked up, he was still there. Not moving, not buying, just standing. Another customer walked in, a young woman carrying a toddler on her hip. She smiled at me, dropped a bag of chips on the counter, and dug around for cash while her kid babbled. I did my best to act normal, but my eyes kept flicking to the man by the freezer. His head moved slightly, following the mother and child as they crossed the store. When they left, the door chiming behind them, the silence felt heavier than before. I glanced back at him and forced my voice into something steady. "Sir, is there something specific you're waiting for? We'll be closing soon for cleaning." That was a lie. Circle K never closed, but maybe it'd get him moving. He turned fully toward me now, eyes wide and unblinking. Then he whispered, "I'm waiting for the right time." A chill went down my spine, opening my mouth. "The right time for what?" I asked, though I already regretted his smile widened, teeth yellow under the fluorescent lights. He didn't answer. He just turned back to the soda door as if our conversation hadn't happened. I ducked behind the counter, my hands trembling as I picked up the phone. I dialed my manager, but he didn't answer. I considered calling the police, but what could I say? A man was standing too long in my store? They'd think I was overreacting. I put the phone down, but my instincts screamed at me that something was wrong. Eventually, the man drifted toward the counter. Relief washed through me. Maybe he'd finally buy something and leave. But instead, he leaned in too close. I could smell sweat and something sour on his breath. "Do you ever work alone at night?" he whispered. My throat tightened. I forced a laugh. "No, there's always someone in the back." Another lie. He tilted his head like a curious animal. "That's good. You'd be surprised how dangerous it can get here after dark." His fingers tapped on the counter in a rhythm, steady and unnerving. Then just like that, he turned and walked out the door. I exhaled hard, shaking. Maybe it was done. Maybe he was just some strange drifter. I tried to convince myself of that as I wiped down the counter again. But 10 minutes later, I looked up and saw him standing outside near the gas pumps. Not moving, not leaving, just watching. I locked the door under the excuse of restocking and grabbed the phone again. This time I called the police. My voice shook as I explained the situation, and the dispatcher asked me to stay calm, that an officer would be sent out. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled in. By then, the man was gone. The officer checked around the pumps, the alleys, even behind the dumpster, but there was no sign of him. "Probably nothing," he said. "Some folks are just odd. Try not to worry." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one working alone. When my shift finally ended, I gathered my things, heart thudding as I stepped into the parking lot. The desert night was still warm, the air dry, but every shadow felt like it was watching me. I got into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. That's when I saw him. In the rearview mirror, crouched behind the dumpster at the edge of the lot, was the man. His hoodie pulled tight, his eyes fixed on me. My breath caught. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching as I sped out of the lot. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit intersection near the hospital. That night, I stayed at my sister's place. In the days that followed, I told my manager what happened. He shrugged, said customers get weird sometimes, and told me not to let it get to me. But the memory of that smile, those words, "I'm waiting for the right time," kept circling in my mind like a vulture. I never saw him again, Not at the store, not around town. But every time I pulled into that lot for another night shift, I found myself scanning the corners, checking behind the dumpster, my pulse racing. Months passed, but the fear lingered. My dad's health declined, bills piled higher, and every night at work I carried the weight of exhaustion, responsibility, and unease. That man might have been just another drifter, but to me, he became a shadow I couldn't shake, a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself with violence. It waits, quiet, patient, until the right time. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Listen to your instincts. Fear is not weakness. It's a signal, a survival tool honed by experience and intuition. Too often, we convince ourselves not to overreact, not to make a scene. But the truth is, protecting yourself should never feel like an overreaction. It's better to look foolish for being cautious than to be remembered for ignoring the warning signs.